but I'm.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
All right, yeah.
I get the.
These? Okay. All right, guys, let's get started then. All right, so today we're gonna continue that section on slope, and it was on parallel lines and perpendicular lines. So last week, was it last week or earlier this week? Last week, we talked about how to find slope. And slope, if you remember the formula, is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That's the slope formula. And what's going to happen today is they're going to give you 2 points for one line and 2 points for another line, and you're going to find the slope of these two, find the slope of these two, and then you're going to say whether those two lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. For them to be parallel, they have to have the same slope. So if one was 2/3, the other was 2/3, that tells us those are parallel lines. For perpendicular lines, that means they're opposite reciprocals of one another, or you can think of it as negative reciprocals. Do you guys all know perpendicular lines meet at a right angle? Does everybody know that? Okay, parallel lines are these two. M and P are perpendicular. And when you have perpendicular lines, they are either negative reciprocals or opposite reciprocals. So if one was 3, that's really 3 over 1. What would the opposite reciprocal be? 1 over 3. And then because this is positive, this one would have to be negative. Okay? So 1's always negative. This is 2 over 3. What's the? Yep, negative 3 over 2. Very good. What's that? Positive 5 over 1. And if you wrote it as 5, that would be fine too. Okay? Then, if we go to this page, so this is what part of your assignment is going to look like today. They're going to give you points F and G and points H and J, and you're going to find their slopes separately. So the first thing I'm going to do is find FJ, and they tell me that F is 3, 6, and G is negative 9, 2. Okay, now if I go and try to find the slope, if you remember from last Friday, I think we went over this, x1, y1 can be your first point, x2, y2 your second point. And what we're going to do is subtract the y's on the top. Truly, it doesn't matter which way you subtract as long as you do the same way for both. So I'm going to go 2 minus 6 over negative 9 minus 3. Okay? And one thing you have to be careful of when you do this is to include that minus sign. Sometimes kids will forget that. So 2 minus 6 is negative 4. Negative 9 minus 12 is what? Negative 9 minus 3? Negative 12. Now, do you guys know if they're both negative, it becomes positive? Yeah. And what goes into 4 and 12? 2 does. Is there something bigger than 2 also? 4 does, yes. So 4 goes in here once, 4 goes in here 3 times, and then the reason it's positive is because they were both negative. Now we're going to do the same thing between H and J. Okay, so H was 5, 4. And J is 2, 3. Okay, now what we're gonna do is find the slope between those two. So when I do that, I can subtract my y's on top. So I'd go 3 minus 4. And then I subtract my x's on the bottom, and that would be 2 minus 5. Okay? 3 minus 4 is a negative 1. 2 minus 5 is a negative 3. And negative 1 over negative 3 would become positive 1 over 3. Now, do you notice how these two are the same? That would mean they're what? Parallel. So that is part of your answer. And then what they want you to do is plot those points and draw the two lines and make sure that they look parallel. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back and plot F and G. So I'm gonna go over 3 up 6. That is my F, okay? And then I'm going to plot negative 9 up 2. That is my G. And honestly with these, using a ruler helps a lot, because if you don't, what happens is that you're going to end up, oops, let's try this again. Okay, it's gonna be hard sometimes to tell if two things are parallel or not. So let me try, oh, it didn't even work. So, or maybe, I don't know, that looks weird though. Okay, so now we're gonna plot the other 2 points. One is over 5 up 4, and the other one is over 2 up 3. And then we can plot that line. I'll try this again. I'm not sure it starts out right, but I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Okay, but do those kind of look parallel?
Yep.
Right? Okay, so that's what you're gonna do for those questions, and now let's go here. So in this question, same thing, we're gonna do F and G. F is 1, 1, and G is negative 1, negative 5. And then we're gonna go ahead and do our formula and find the slope. And remember, you subtract your y's on the top. So it's negative 5 minus 1. And on the bottom, we subtract our x's. So it's negative 1 subtract 1. Okay? Now, negative 5 minus 1 is negative 6. Negative 1 minus 1 is negative 2. Negative 6 divided by a negative 2. What do you think that reduces? It's a positive 3 or 3 over 1. Either one is fine. Okay? Then if we go to our next 2 points, one of them is 3, 2, and 6, 1. All right, so now when you go ahead to find the slope of this one, you're gonna subtract your y's, which would be 1 minus 2, and then subtract your x's on the bottom, which is 6 minus 3. 1 minus 2 is a negative 1. 6 minus 3 is 3. So what do you notice about these two slopes?
They're flipped.
They're opposite reciprocals. So what does that tell us about the lines?
Not parallel.
Not parallel, but they are what? Perpendicular. If you just go PERP, I'll know what you mean by that. And then you have to graph it, okay? So, let's try this again. Over 1, up 1 is a point. And then -1, -5 is a point. Yeah? Yeah. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong with that, but, okay, then let's do our second line. And we're gonna graph 3, 2, as well as 6, 1. Okay, so this one is coming down. Not good, but that should look perpendicular, and I have rulers up here for when you're doing them in your assignment, and especially on the test, if you're checking, I would use a ruler, and make sure your lines cover the whole graph, okay? Now, if we go to this page, this is probably the hardest part of this lesson. And what happens is they give you a point and a line, and they're asking you to write an equation in slope-intercept form that is parallel to this line, okay? Can you tell what the slope of this line is? Do you guys remember last Friday writing something in what was called point slope form like this, okay? The slope in point slope form is the number in front of the parentheses there. So what this is telling us is the slope of our line is -4, and then we never want to look at that line again, so I kind of cross that out. Then it says to take the point -5, 4, and you're gonna write an equation for it, okay? So we're gonna write down y equals, because this is in slope-intercept form, mx plus b. M is your slope, and I don't know if you remember this from algebra or not, but b is called your y-intercept, and it's where your line crosses the y-axis. So my line crosses the y-axis right here. So that's what y-intercept means, okay? So we're gonna plug in what we have here. This is our x, this is our y, this is our m, and what we have to find is b. So n for y is 4, n for m is -4, n for x is -5, and then b is what we're looking for. So we're doing all this work to find b. So then I write 4 equals -4 times -5 is a +20. Then I subtract 20, and I get that my b is -16. Okay? Now, to write an equation of a line, this is important because a lot of kids get this mixed up. When you write y equals mx plus b, there's 2 things you substitute in for. You substitute in for m and you substitute in for b. So what we're gonna do is go y equals m is -4, x, and b is what we found right here. So you take your m from here and your b and you substitute those in. So you could go plus a negative 16, or you could just write that as y equals negative 4x, and that would be minus 16. Either of those are correct. Okay, and then we have one more. So if we go here, we're gonna do that same thing, but this time what they're saying is that our line is perpendicular to this line, and the slope of this line is 1/5. Perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocals or opposite reciprocals. What's opposite reciprocal of 1/5? What's the reciprocal of 1/5? Wouldn't it be 5, right? And this is positive, so it would be negative 5. So you do the reciprocal of it, and if this is positive, that one has to be negative. Then you never look at this again, and it goes through the point to 0. Bless you. So now what you're gonna do is write y equals mx plus b. This is my m, this is my x, this is my y. So my y is 0, my m is negative 5, my x is 2, and then plus b. Now, negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. And then I'm going to bring that 10 over by adding it. So b is 10. Now, we're not quite done, because now what we have to do, we have our b and we have our m, and we have to substitute those back in to this. And when you do that, you substitute in your m and your b. So you're gonna go y equals, my m is up there, it's negative 5x, and my b is here, it's plus 10. Okay, everybody okay with that? All right, so your assignment for today is these problems in the book. And then I'll set up the book so you can check your work. And then tomorrow you have a practice test, and you have a test on the second half of chapter 2 on Friday. Oh, and I was asked by a student to give you guys a survey, okay? So if you would fill this in and then give it to me, that would be great. You're gonna have to do this when you get back, okay? So this is for one of Mrs. Wood's college psychology classes. I gave you guys one for next too in the back. It's a survey for sophomores, so you probably don't need it, unless you wanna ask more. Yeah, when you get done with that survey, if you guys would just bring it up to me,